And we are live. Welcome to Super Secret HQ. My name is Josh. You can follow me on Super Josh. I am joined today by my good friend Nikko Caruso, and today is all about your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. We're very excited to be with you today. But first, before we talk about Spider-Man, I want to we're going to do our segment Into the Twitterverse. And today we're going to be talking about the What is the Matrix teaser that was teased yesterday online with probably the craziest campaign I have ever seen from a teaser. Nikko, would you like to share with us what the great people at Warner Brothers did yesterday?
Well, yeah, I would. But the first thing I want to say is I feel like I was exposed yesterday for admitting I've never seen the Matrix trilogy. And see, I knew it was going to be worked in, and that caught a lot of you by storm, being the movie guy and all. But what's funny is for me, it's been on in the background with friends and stuff, but there were some things I missed. I think it was just what I was into at the time. The big things I missed were like the Matrix, Harry Potter. I never got into till way later in life. Those are the two that come off the top of my head. But I did check out the teaser because y'all were going crazy about it. I'm like, well, I want to be a part of the hype, because who doesn't want to be hyped about something? And it was cool. All I got from it is I clicked on this teaser, saw some cool things, but it told me what time I was watching it at. And the more I went back to it, the time kept changing. I don't know how they do that, but that's pretty cool. And it looks like it's going to be pretty cool. All Matrix fans seem to be really pleased with not only what they got from a visual standpoint, but from the marketing as well. But it piqued my interest to be like, hey, maybe I need to check these things out so I could better understand, even what the greater parts of the teaser were. So how about you? What'd you think of it?
Yeah, I loved it. I am a huge fan of The Matrix. I saw the original back in 1999. A friend of mine showed it to me, and it was contraband in my house because it was an R-rated movie, Nikko.
Oh,
And I grew up in a very strict, good old Christian home, and my parents didn't like me watching R-rated movies. But we watched it. I loved it. And then the sequels came out a couple of years later. And initially, when the sequels came out, and I'm actually really excited for you to see the sequels, Nikko, because when the sequels came out initially, nobody really understood them. It wasn't that they were bad movies. It was just that the Wachowskis were so ahead of the curve when it came to technology and what technology was doing to us and all of that stuff. That they, I think it was just confusing. People didn't really understand it. But now watching it, years later, and kind of technology being a regular part of my life, they're way more interesting. So I'm actually really excited. You're kind of an interesting test case. I don't want to spoil it too much.
I'm excited to do the test case.
But I would love to see what someone from 2021 thinks about the Matrix sequels upon first watch. I think that they're excellent. They are currently on HBO Max if you're in the United States.
Okay.
And definitely worth watching. Just want to shout out really quick some people from your Let's Go podcast network, including one of your fellow Vigilante 1939.
Zeddy is.
Co-host Zeddy is on. Chris is on. What up, fellas? Good to have you joining us on the stream. But yeah, no, the teaser for the Matrix, the Matrix 4, which is being called the Matrix Resurrections, looks absolutely insane. I mean, you're right. How they pulled this off. I mean, I kind of, having a background in video production, I kind of know how they pulled it off.
Oh, okay, cool.
But yeah, it's an insane amount of work that they would have to do in order to do it. I mean, from beginning to end, and stuff. And I don't want to ruin it for anybody. I don't want to ruin the magic of it. But it's really cool. You got a unique view of the teaser, which I thought was really cool. Everybody got kind of different glimpses. I think everybody sees Yahya as a young Morpheus, which is really crazy how they make him look like a young Lawrence Fishburne.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's really, really cool. And then I think everybody saw Neo kind of walking in the hotel. So really, really interesting. The trailer hits tomorrow. I cannot wait for it. I think it's going to be really cool. And I don't know if you've read any of the plot details that have leaked or anything, or the rumors, but it sounds absolutely off the wall gonzo. And I cannot wait for it. I love when people just dive right into things. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. But yeah, no, I can't really have a conversation with you about whether or not the Matrix sequels are good, other than to say, Nikko, you need to watch them.
I will. I promise I will. And what's cool is I am going in quite literally blind. Like I know the concept behind like the red and blue pill, because that's like in pop culture, that's like used a lot, but not much past that. So these quite literally will be fresh going in blind watches. Even if I were to see plot leaks from this movie, I would not know what is happening. So I guess that's a really good thing, and you'll be one of the first people I update, because I've seen you really like the sequels. Someone else I saw really likes sequels, but our guy Chris Evans in the chat despises those sequels that I saw. So that'll be fun to maybe see both viewpoints, or for me to go one way or the other and have you try to convince me. That's always fun. I think when you watch something for the first time that people love.
I want to say that I'm being I'm being unique in saying that the sequels are good, but you're right. There's a literal, no, you are absolutely correct. It is very in vogue at the moment on film Twitter to say that the Matrix sequels are good. There's a lot of film critics that are like, actually, we were wrong about the Matrix sequels. They were really good. So yes, but we won't belabor this too much, other than to say looking forward to that. And also to give a little teaser, our friend Carlos from the Nerd Room hinted that we may have a mega cast type show in the lead up to the Matrix 4, which will be fun. So hopefully you'll see them by then, Nikko, and hopefully I think you're gonna love them. So hopefully you'll be
I will too. Hopefully, I just have a feeling I will.
Hopefully you'll be a raving fan, and we'll be able to discuss that. But let's not belabor this too much, because here's a opinion from Matrix 1 and 2 are really good. 3 should have never been made. Well, you're wrong, Zeddy. They're all good. So that ends that debate.
Barry, I love it. It's right to the point. You're wrong. I'm done. Let's move on.
In Zeddy's defense, 3 is probably the weakest one of them, but it's even that one I felt holds up way better. And I also think he has an argument to be made that Matrix 2 and 3 could have been edited and made into yes, much love, my brother. Yes, much love. Could have probably been one film. But I don't want to say much more because you haven't seen them. So
yeah, true.
But yes, but everybody should stay tuned for the Matrix trailer tomorrow, the Matrix Resurrections trailer. They released a really cool all-white poster with the red and blue pill on it.
That was tight.
That looks really, really cool. So I'm looking forward to it. But let's go to the main event, which is talking about our favorite, our friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Yes, the amazing Spider-Man in all of its forms and all of its incarnations. And how I want to kick off this conversation is sort of a two-part question.
Sure.
I know I sent you a list and this wasn't on it, but I want to ask you, yes. What is your first Spider-Man memory, and what does Spider-Man mean to you?
That's a good point. That's a great question. Wow, that's a great question, Josh, my man. So my first memory, a lot of it kind of blends together. So it's a 3-parter. It would be being introduced to the animated series from the 90s, that's the first ever Spider-Man thing I saw. At the same time around that was happening, Spider-Man 1, Raimi's first film with Tobey Maguire, was coming out. And as I was getting into Spider-Man, which I'll show later, it's far away from me, or I'll send a clip on Twitter later. My Aunt Cena, shout out to my Aunt Cena, who I don't think will ever watch this, but I'll tell her that I shouted her out. Knew I was becoming such a big Spider-Man fan, knew that my dad was a Spider-Man fan for her entire lifespan of knowing him, because it's her brother. She waited in line at a Blockbuster in a contest to win their like life-size Tobey Maguire. It's not really a statue, it's like a foam mannequin. And she won it and gave it to me for that birthday in 2002, right around the time that the first film came out. So those are all my first memories, like wrestling with the mannequin, trying to grab some of my dad's action figures off the shelf, which, was I shouldn't have done because he had them very meticulously. And then the 90s cartoon and, that first film. And what Spider-Man means to me is a lot. I still firmly believe he's the most relatable superhero of all time. He's the hero we see the most have to juggle personal stuff, relationship stuff, financial things, most of all, that we don't really see touched on with a lot of superheroes too often. And as I was growing up, especially finding like the Ultimate run in the comics by Brian Michael Bendis, I felt like I could relate to him a lot. He was a skinnier kid, a nerdier kid, right? And when he put on the mask, he got to be a hero, but then he would have to be himself. And as I've talked about on this on a lot of shows, but to rehash it again, if someone watching is just meeting me for the first time, is I am someone who stutters, and when I was a kid, it was a lot worse. So of course, kids in elementary school and stuff can be mean and can be rough. Now it's in my age, I realized just because they didn't understand or they were uncomfortable, and when we're uncomfortable, we act in certain ways without any rationale. But so the kind of ridicule bullying aspect, I got to see that with this comic book character, and then whenever I overcame a situation or was in a different situation or one where I felt more comfortable, I felt like in those moments I could be Spider-Man. Oh, so I would go like, hey, I'm Spider-Man right now because I'm going through this thing, but I'm scared, but I'm doing it anyway. And in the moments that were harder, I'm like, okay, this is what it's like to be Peter, and I know I'll get my Spider-Man moment, etc. And I just think he has like the coolest costume ever too. That's what means.
He really does. He really does.
Quite literally. So yeah, so that's what Spider-Man means to me. That's a great question. I haven't been asked that.
Nice. Yeah, I would say that Spider-Man for me, I'm much more of a DC fan. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a recurring theme on the show. We're going to have probably a lot more DC content on the show than Marvel content, but who knows? You may during the course of this show send me down a Marvel rabbit hole with comics recommendations coming up later.
Oh, I will.
So who knows? But I love the MCU. I love the films. And the first thing I was introduced to with Spider-Man was when I was very young, and I watched some reruns of the 1970s live-action Spider-Man series. They couldn't even get the white in his eyes, so his eyes were just cut out, and it was literally him moving his arms. Well, they lifted him with a rig up the side of a building, so his hands weren't even touching the building. Usually,
Incredible.
It's literally worse than the technology they use at the Disneyland stunt show,
of course,
which is great. I went and saw it, by the way. It's really, really awesome.
Oh, I'm sure it is.
Yeah, it's really cool. But yeah, so that was my very first memory. But I think my first meaningful memory of Spider-Man was Chris Evans. The 70s series was awesome. Yes, it was. It was really it's great for what it is. But the very first kind of experience that I had with Spider-Man was like in long form was the animated Spider-Man, the animated series. And I just want to shout it out really quick because it's on Disney Plus. If you're anywhere in the world that has Disney Plus, and it is an absolutely phenomenal show.
That's
It had the dreadful misfortune of being released at the same time as Batman the Animated Series. And it also had the dreadful misfortune of having people who did not invest in the animation or the music or anything in the same way that Batman the Animated Series did. But the storytelling on Spider-Man the Animated Series is just as good as Batman the Animated Series. They really get the character. They do long arcs on that show, which they don't do in Batman the Animated Series. So that really distinguishes it. It's a lot of fun. And man, Christopher Daniel Barnes, holy cow. When I read Spider-Man comics, the few that I have, that is the voice that I hear when I read the comics. Brother. He was so good. And I remember there was a campaign. Symbiote Saga in Spider-Man TAS was legendary. Absolutely it was. It's the best version of that story. That is a good opinion you have, Zeddy. But yes.
He makes up for the Matrix one with that one, right?
Yeah. But yes, that is my first Spider-Man memory, is Spider-Man the Animated Series, and I loved it. And it actually kind of was my intro to arc storytelling, like
That's cool.
as a kid. So I would say that I had to watch every episode because I didn't want to miss what was happening next on the show. So spectacular storytelling. And then, of course, as I got older, the Raimi films came out. Those came out. I was a freshman in high school, Nico. How old were you when they came out?
The first one, I was 7.
Nice.
And then by the time they were over, in 2007, I was 12 or 13.
Nice. Yeah, I was a sophomore in college when they were over. So
love it.
Yeah.
Multiple generations. We love it. You love to see it.
Yeah, but it's but yeah, so but yeah, of course, I mean that a lot of people don't realize how if you didn't live through that summer that the first Raimi Spider-Man came out, it was a absolute sensation. The only thing I can think of that was similar was probably Batmania from 1989. But I was too young when that was when that happened. I was 2. So I didn't directly experience that. But yeah, it was Spider-Man was everywhere. Freaking Chad Kroger's Hero was
song, man.
Was the number one, was the song of the summer. Everybody makes fun of Nickelback, but man, I gotta tell you, that song was on the radio every 5 minutes.
It's a great song.
And yeah, it was man, that was quite the summer. It was also the first film to break $100 million. But before we go too much into that, I want to ask you, what is your favorite Spider-Man film?
Absolutely. It's Spider-Man 2. It's cool as we just did a retrospective on it for a sub show of the Vigilante 1939 that me and my father do with good friend Mr. Peter Vera from Shred of Gotham and Batman on Film, talking about Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 2.1, which is the slightly extended cut of it. It's my favorite Spider-Man film. It's one of my favorite. It's my second favorite comic book movie of all time, if you count The Dark Knight being the first. I think it really hammers home the idea of, with great power comes great responsibility. The best of all the live action iterations, and even some of the comic book stuff too. I'm not gonna lie to you. There's something about it as a movie that's really emotional for me, and I really loved it the first time I saw it. I do vaguely remember seeing it, when I was 10 or whatever, back in 2004. But it's my favorite Spider-Man film. I don't think it'll ever be topped. And that's okay, because what it does for the character so much. And I'm excited for No Way Home and to potentially see all my guys return. But that's still like a crossover, big scale event, whereas the intimacy and the pure Spider-Man nature of Spider-Man 2, that movie is just timeless to me. I believe that the best Spider-Man film has been made, and I believe the best Batman film has been made. So it's Spider-Man 2 for me.
You know what? I actually think that you have. So I don't love Spider-Man 2 as much as you do, but
That's fair.
I still think it is a phenomenal Spider-Man movie,
Mhm.
and I think it's probably the best live action movie that's been
Mhm.
released. Overall, as a film, Alfred Molina is absolutely
Oh yeah,
incredible in that movie.
outstanding.
Just like terrific. And I agree with you. I think as far as like a classic Spider-Man story, I mean, unless they completely change gears in the MCU for the college trilogy that's rumored,
Yeah.
after the high school trilogy, I which could happen, by the way. I
Oh, it
mean,
could.
they've kind of done the novelty of the MCU. We can talk about that later. But
Sure.
the college could be a time where they kind of revert back to a more like traditional Spidey
Mhm.
for a couple of films, and I think Kevin Feige would be down with that.
So
What
do
a
I.
lot of what a lot of people forget is that Kevin Feige was involved in the Raimi Spider-Man
Yeah.
films too.
Mhm.
He was involved in the original Bryan Singer X-Men films and
Yep.
in the Raimi Spider-Man films. So
Mhm.
Feige's got his finger, maybe not in as big a capacity as the MCU, but he definitely has his fingerprints on this stuff
Oh, of course.
as well. So he gets what, you know, those classic elements. But yeah, no, my favorite Spider-Man film I think so far is Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah, that's a
That's
great one.
it's pretty terrific. I know it's an animated movie, but I really just flipping love that film. I love how much heart it has.
Mhm.
I love how they elevated, in my opinion, Miles Morales' character. I mean,
Oh, 100%.
they
100%.
they fleshed him out in a similar way that like Wonder Woman was kind of fleshed out when Gal Gadot did her version of it. I think that Into the Spider-Verse kind of did that with Miles Morales, you know.
That's a good take.
And now when you read Miles Morales stuff, it's like, oh, he's always a good character, but I think he's like a terrific character now.
100%.
So yeah, I think that's my favorite movie from that era. Did you like Into the Spider-Verse?
Oh, I love it. I love it. What's funny is I saw that multiple times in the theater because the first time I saw it, I accidentally saw it in 3D,
Oh,
which was cool, but like I also don't do 3D movies well. So the whole film, because it's brilliantly shot, almost like it's comic book pages turning, which I love, which I think is a masterful way to do it. A lot of the jumping off screen was getting me. So I really liked it the first time, but I was also like
kind of sick.
borderline sick after the movie. Then I
Yeah.
went to see it again a couple days later, and I'm like, oh, now I could relax a little bit, not be so overstimulated. This thing is masterful. It should have absolutely won the Oscar, which it did. I agree with you. It elevated Miles because it gave him that mainstream recognition,
hmm
and it helped get more people's eyes on the character. And I
hmm
think the way they wrote him too was so inspiring.
hmm
And
hmm
that because a lot of the times these characters don't get that big until they're brought to the screen. And I think they brilliantly did that. And I like Jake Johnson's Peter. I liked Chris Pine's Spider-Man for us.
Me
I
too.
thought he
Me
was
too.
great. Um,
Now, Nico, as the keeper of all things Spidey and the knowledge of Spidey,
I try.
do you remember which was it Pine's Spider-Man that they originally wanted Tobey Maguire to play, or was it Jake Johnson's? Because I kind of feel like I kind of feel like
I don't know.
Toby Toby Maguire would have been a good Chris Pine Spider-Man, but I don't know if he's the right. I think Jake Johnson is kind of like the miserable failure of an adult
Yeah.
kind of caricature that they needed for that
That's a good
version of
point. I don't
Spider-Man.
remember. I would hope it's Pines because that would fit more because that version of Spider-Man, he was in his prime.
Mhm,
He won over the people of New York mostly.
mhm.
He kind of entered that phase of his career, whereas Jake Johnson was kind of on the out. I wouldn't be able to have I like Jake Johnson as the Peter B. Parker. I don't think I would have been able to buy Toby as that.
No.
Um, So I'm hoping it was the Chris Pine one, because that would have made more sense too. He gets like the small cameo in there, and they let Jake Johnson do his thing with that more original spin on what that Peter B. Parker would be. But no, I don't know off the top of my head.
Jake Johnson, if somebody watching knows, let us know in the comments.
Yeah,
but
please.
Jake Johnson did such a great job in that role. He's basically his New Girl character, Spider-Man.
Which you know what works, because I love New Girl.
Yeah. So it was really, really great. But yeah, I love his take on the character. Speaking of, I think that it's worth mentioning, since you mentioned Spider-Man 2. And the Raimi films, that Raimi did such a great job casting the villains.
Perfect.
Alfred Molina is like a great Doc Ock. That original Spider-Man, the original Spider-Man's Green Goblin costume is so unfortunate because underneath it, Willem Dafoe is giving an amazing performance as Green Goblin. It just, man, that costume turns it into Power Rangers.
He does look like a xenomorph mixed with a Power Ranger.
Yeah. But we won't get too much into rumors, but we don't want to spoil No Way Home for people. But yeah. So I think that's great. And Sandman was perfectly cast too. Thomas Hayden Church. But unfortunately, the studio wanted to shove the Venom thing in, and with a very, Raimi was kind of trying to give it a spin that he could relate to. He wasn't a fan of Venom as a character.
Yeah, he wasn't.
And I think that, Topher Grace just didn't do the job.
Which shocks me too, because I haven't met someone. I mean, you might feel this way, but I haven't met someone who doesn't like Venom as a character. I think he's awesome.
Yeah, and awesome. Tom Hardy, and Tom Hardy gets it. Tom Hardy gets what that character is. He knows it's kind of like off the wall crazy, and I love that about him. He's just like, he's so like off kilter.
Mm-hmm.
In just the right way. And I think, isn't a lot of Tom Hardy's stuff ad-libbed in Venom?
A lot of it is, yeah. And I could only imagine in 2, I think it's a little more. And I actually think in Let There Be Carnage, his voice is dubbed in the Venom voice now.
Oh, wow.
It sounds way different. It sounds different than the first one. Because I've seen those trailers a few times now. And Venom was on the other day, and the voice was talking. I go, yeah, see, I think Hardy, his voice got mixed in. I think he did some of the dubbing with it, which just adds to the fact that he really wants to continue to make this his animal.
Yeah, no, it's really great. But we're not talking about Venom. We're talking about Spider-Man. So let's move on to our favorite Spider-Man actors. Who is your favorite? And I know for a fact there's disagreement here between you and I. So there is deep disagreement here. So,
and it's all love. It's all love.
It's all love. Go ahead, Nico.
Yeah,
you start.
Tobey Maguire.
And
he's the GOAT. He's the greatest of all time. He's I think he's the best Peter. I think he's the best Spider-Man. I think he's the best live action actor to play this part. Him as an actor, everything outside of this is whatever you want to make of it. But I do think he did this role well for the type of world Raimi created and for the way these movies were made in the early 2000s. I think he did a perfect job. I know there was some stuff in 3 that gets wonky, but if I'm just going to speak from 1 and 2, he's my favorite Spider-Man. I think he's the best Spider-Man. And if and when I get to see him again a couple months from now, I will be an emotional, not even emotional roller coaster. I will be an emotional runaway horse down a very long road.
Yeah, man. You know who? It's funny because I know you've mentioned before that you relate most to Spider-Man, and I know Tobey Maguire's your favorite. And that's
Yeah, he's betting. Here we go.
Yep, here we go. But I actually think you remind me most in temperament of Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man.
Yeah, I've gotten that. Thank you again, brother.
who in my opinion was the coolest Spider-Man, like temperament wise. Yeah. I'm of the opinion I like a lot of what Tobey did in the role. Don't get me wrong. I think that he brought a lot of sincerity and heart as Peter Parker, for sure. The scenes with him and Uncle Ben are so heartwarming and touching and just wonderful to watch, and stuff. The issue I have with what's his name? Tobey.
Give him the respect, Josh. Remember
the issue I have with Tobey is the issue I have.
Can't do it on here, Pete. It's a family show.
Hey, it's clock, right? It's clock always. The issue I have with Tobey is Tobey to me was a little bit too. See, my favorite Spider-Man ever overall. I'll give you my favorite live action in a minute here, and there's deep disagreement here as well.
Oh, I know.
But
I knew when I came in, brother. I knew what I was signing up for.
My favorite Spider-Man overall is Christopher Daniel Barnes. I think that he is the perfect embodiment of Spider-Man. Spider-Man, you've got to have the heart moments because he goes through a lot. You've got to be, but you also have to be able to balance that with being fully confident in your Spidey suit and delivering these quips that have to be delivered perfectly when you're in the suit. And to me, Tobey always sounded a little goofy delivering the quips.
When he was delivering them, okay. That's fair. That's fair.
So that is my main complaint. And to me, that is such an important part of Spider-Man's character. It would kind of be like Terry McGinnis kind of having the same. Terry McGinnis and Peter Parker are very similar in my mind. They talk a lot of smack, and stuff like that. And yes, we will do a Batman Beyond show. I'll probably have Zeddy on for that.
You got to. No other way.
Yeah. But yes, so that would be my chief complaint about Tobey Maguire. And I have some other thoughts too, but I'll give you my favorite Spider-Man live action actor, and I'm ready to be ripped apart. So here I go. But I'm gonna explain why.
Sure.
My favorite live action Spider-Man is Tom Holland.
Sure.
And I think that he is the best because to me, he embodies that balance. He's totally that, like, maybe not so much anymore, but when he was first cast, he had that nerdy kind of affect to him. You could see that he'd be a kid that would be picked on in school and made fun of and stuff like that. I think Tom, as he's gotten older, has just gotten way more swag and way more, way more just like confidence and stuff like that. And I'm not wearing a Snyder V-neck. I'm wearing a swoop tee, Pete. So and then Tom is just great at delivering the quips. Andrew was great at it too. But to me, Andrew was a little bit too hip for me.
His Peter was way too cool.
Yeah, his Peter was way too cool. To Andrew Garfield's Peter is like college years Peter. You know? That's kind of what I think of when I think of college years Peter. But even then, still too cool. Like he still needs to be believable as kind of a down and out kind of a person.
Yeah.
So tell me why I'm wrong, Nikko.
You're not wrong at all. What's funny is, like, I've never, and maybe this just is like lost in like the keyboard, because anytime you read something over text, you could interpret it 90 ways and it might not be the way the person who hit send intended. But I have tried to make it clear, like I dislike those movies mainly based on the material. I actually think Tom's really good. Like I think he's fine. I just always rank him lower than the 3, and I make like the Iron Boy jokes, etc. But that's the material, right? It's not his fault. I think he's a darn good Peter, and I do like him in the costume. I do think he is good at the delivery. That's because I mean, I won't even argue this. He is a stronger actor than Toby is just by his talent alone, just in anything he's done, not just Spider-Man. But it's just the idea of, at least early on, I think they overplayed the he was really young thing. Because Peter, to me, like going back to the early, Lee Ditko days, he was a pretty mature teenager. And this one played it to more of a naive standpoint, and this like seeking approval material, which is okay. It's mainly just that for me. I don't dislike him, and I actually really dig, and I think we'll get into this later, I really dig the vibe he was giving me in the beginning of that No Way Home trailer. Because like you, I have asked for him by himself, because I can argue I haven't seen enough of that. And I'm almost angry for him, and he doesn't care because he's rich and he gets to hang out with all these people, and he gets to be in the biggest films ever. And he's quite literally has made Spider-Man into $1 billion. What he made a film get $1 billion. He's elite as it comes. But I do think if I sat him down, I would be like, you haven't been on your own, right? And he would be like, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I really want to see it because I think he could pull it off. Homecoming, there's a lot of good in there. And I think Downey is just such a presence that whenever he came on screen, it was distracting to me. Not just not just the mentor aspect, like just the fact that he was in the movie, even though it's only 4 or 5 scenes, like when he's on, it's like, there's Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man. There we go. He's the GOAT of superhero castings, right? He's one of them. Like, okay, how am I not going to be taken out of this because he's there? But no, so I wouldn't say you're wrong. And I actually think he has the benefit of not being done. So we're having the debate about the live action Spider-Man, and he's going to do this for a long time. So I think the fact that he gets to mature in the role, like a comic book, he gets to grow up like in the comics, is going to be good for him. I just don't like a lot of the material they've given him. And, I feel like I haven't seen him be fully Spider-Man yet because it's clouded by, I think Homecoming, there's still a big Iron Man need for approval. And Far From Home, I think the writing in Far From Home is very wonky to me because it's like a third of an Endgame epilogue and a lot of explaining of the blip. Then you get into a story with Peter, but Jake Gyllenhaal is very overpowering too, and he gets a lot of focus, and all of a sudden people of the world love Mysterio, and Spidey quite literally saved the world with the Avengers. So it's like, wow, they were so quick to accept this new hero. So, and then, but the end stuff with the Spider Sense, I hate that they call it Peter Tingle, but the but the final stuff in Far From Home, I think is sick. I think it's awesome. And when he beats Mysterio is when I'm like, all right, you're there. You're pretty much there. Let's see your solo outing. And then they did the whole, well, let's bring everyone back. And I'm like, all right, well, that's cool too. So maybe a little bit in this movie, and the next one I'll fall in love with Tom. But no, he's a great guy. He's a great actor. But
I feel like you and him would be pals, Nico.
I would like to think so. I just try to be pals with everyone. And the only other thing I'll say, because I don't want to ramble too much, is I don't think, and I've argued with some more of our aggressive friends on here, that I don't think we've seen him have the amount of personal struggles that we would see from Peter Parker. I think Toby had the most, Andrew had a good amount, and Tom's is like, you got these struggles, but then there's so many of these benefits he gets. And I get they had to place him in the MCU at a certain point in time, and for continuity purposes, these things need to happen. But sometimes I feel like it takes away from him, but it's not his fault. So in summary, Toby is the GOAT. Tom Holland is not the GOAT yet, in my eyes.
Yeah, no, and what you're referring to, I actually wrote a tweet the other week,
Saw it.
and you retweeted it, and other people did. I don't disagree with the idea that Tom Holland's Spider-Man has kind of been co-opted by the MCU, and he hasn't really gotten an opportunity to really tell a real Spider-Man story. Because you're right, part of Spider-Man's character is he's down on his luck, he struggles, he goes through hardship, and we haven't really been able to see that because a lot of his movies have been about his team ups with Iron Man and whatever else. And I also agree that I think in Homecoming, I wish Iron Man was used. I don't mind Iron Man being in the film. Like, I get why they had to do that, right? Because the novelty of Spider-Man coming home to the MCU, a literal homecoming to the Marvel universe, is that you can cross over with these other characters. So that's a difference that they can do now that they wouldn't have been able to do in previous Spider-Man movies. So of course they're going to capitalize on it. But I think after this trilogy, we've seen that, and I would like to see the next trilogy kind of be a little bit more traditional in the way that it approaches Spider-Man. And so, having Peter as a broke college student
100%
would be an awesome way to go about that. I also have a casting for Uncle Ben in the MCU. I don't know if you've seen this from me before, but I think you will freaking love it.
Who is it?
Mark Duplass.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't that be great?
That's a good one.
For a flashback, I think that he makes sense with Marissa Tomei. I think that he's got the earnestness and like the sort of like vibe you want from an Uncle Ben. He doesn't typically play those characters, that kind of a character, but I think that he could pull it off.
Oh, I think that's a great call. That's a good one, man. I don't even know who I would cast. I haven't even thought about that because I just haven't thought about that, but that's awesome.
Have you watched the latest What If?
No, but I know they finally mentioned him.
Yeah, you saw
it. I was having fun with the whole, I think I retweeted a tweet that said it took What If and a zombie episode to get us some Uncle Ben content. But I was just having fun with it.
Yeah, that is great Spider-Man material, that episode. You're going to love that episode.
But I'm excited for that.
But Tom Holland doesn't do the voice in it, so...
I know. I'm surprised that they couldn't get him for that.
Yeah, but it sounds...
Maybe he didn't want to do it. I don't know.
But it sounds just like him. So.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But yeah, that's I agree with you. I think we will see Uncle Ben eventually. I think we'll have a flashback, hopefully, and hopefully it's Mark Duplass.
Yeah,
you're welcome, Kevin Feige, for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Ooh, this is a good one. I think Ben Affleck could also make a great Uncle Ben. I don't think that's a bad one either. That's really good.
That's not a bad one. I'll tell you who would be good too, because he's pulling off like the gray look really well. Is Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. Again, not somebody who typically does a role like that, but would, and I think you kind of need that a little bit,
I agree.
But have you seen the meme talking about Tom and Peter? Have you seen the meme going around where it's Tobey Maguire's Peter saying, my Uncle Ben told me with great power, and then it cuts to the scene from Far From Home where Tom Holland's crying about Tony Stark, and he completes it with comes great responsibility.
I would like
and
that.
It's like, oh my gosh, how freaking emotional would that be to introduce Uncle Ben into the MCU?
I think No Way Home, you might not see him. And in fact, you probably won't see an Uncle Ben, but I think you're going to hear, that's the first time you're going to hear Tom talk about him. If they don't, when he's with the other two guys, I'm going to call Kevin Feige. He won't answer, but I'll leave a voicemail and say, how did you not put a reference that all three of them could bond over real quick? Like, how it's one of the only things they all have in common, because they all look different. Their supporting people are all way different. Their villains are all pretty different.
They all have different temperaments.
Different jobs, experiences, their place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta let them bond over the Ben thing. You just have to.
Well, that and we assume that J.K. Simmons was probably Andrew Garfield's J. Jonah Jameson as well.
Of course, he was the consistent. He was the variant was always the same with him. He never changed.
Yeah. Speaking of Andrew Garfield, I'll lead this one if you don't mind,
Sure, go ahead.
Nico. But the best scene in a Spider-Man movie for me was one that I saw recently floating around Twitter. And it's when a little boy dressed up as Spider-Man runs out into the crowd and faces off with Paul Giamatti's Rhino. And Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man jumps in, tells him he did a good job, defending him, and then tells him to go back to his mom. To me, that was so heartwarming, touching, and it's probably my favorite Spider-Man thing I've ever seen on film. So that one is mine.
I love the ending of Amazing 2 right there. That's a great Spider-Man moment. I'm a pretty avid, they'll probably hear this in the next couple of weeks. I'm a pretty avid Amazing 2 defender. Not where I, consider it one of the best movies ever, but I let go a lot of the problems because I appreciate a lot of what they went for as a Spider-Man fan. For me, the best scene in a Spider-Man movie, it changes every day. But no, this one stuck with me the first time I saw it because I think the first time I felt big stakes in a movie is in the first Raimi film when the Green Goblin forces him to choose and he drops the train car and MJ. And just the shot where you see the both fall in his eyes, and then as he's running to get MJ first, you see the train falling behind him and how he ultimately saves both at the same time. I think it's brilliant. It's brilliant. A close second. And Zeddy just put it in. He read my mind. The crane scene in Amazing 1. A big critique of mine, he hasn't been in New York that much in the MCU. His relationship with New York is very important to his character. So when he was hurt and the cranes all form so he could jump over all of them, the people railing behind him, that's another really great one. And the train scene in Spider-Man 2 is masterful. But for me, it's when he chooses to save both, because he is that hero and he has the power to do it. Just the way that scene is shot is so emotional for me. I think it's outstanding.
One of the all-time greatest gifts comes from that train scene.
All of them.
Yeah, I love what was the first scene that you mentioned? I'm sorry, it totally slipped.
When the Green Goblin, when he drops MJ and the train car at the same time.
Yes, absolutely, 100%. Love that scene. It was also super emotional because they added. That movie came out less than a year. Less than a year after 9/11. And that was actually really, really just the people of New York rallying behind a hero. Yeah. And I think that the reason Spider-Man was so powerful, like a lot of people don't realize, a lot of our younger compatriots don't realize that superhero movies didn't come out like they do now.
No, they didn't.
They were very, very rare. Like before Spider-Man 2, it was like 2 years prior. It was the original X-Men movie. And so, there were 2 years between X-Men and Spider-Man. And so we needed a hero in that moment. America did. And Spider-Man, kind of, as silly as it sounds, it was kind of a lifting of our spirits. And to see the people of New York, like, really appreciative of Spider-Man. Also, Sam Raimi made the decision, and I think it was a good decision, to leave the World Trade Center in the original Spider-Man.
I think that was a great call. And what he also did was, I'm pretty sure Yeah. Oh, of course, Eddie. That I can't cry on air, Zeddy. Come on now. They also put in the scene where at the end of the movie he's swinging and he lands on the American flag. And
Yes.
then he jumps and then that's how it ends. I
Mhm.
still think that's very appropriate. I think that's great, especially for when that film came out. That's so powerful.
An homage, and that was an homage, and Raimi kind of made that his featuring the American flag, and at the end of all of his movies was kind of his homage to Christopher Reeve flying over the world.
Yeah.
It was the same sort of thing that he wanted to try and do. So yeah, that was such a powerful film for the time. So there's lots of great. The reason I wanted to bring this topic up is because I feel like the Spider-Man franchise is really great at coming up with these iconic scenes. Another scene that I can think of that's really powerful is when Gwen Stacy dies.
It's a big one.
That scene just absolutely guts me every single time. And apparently that's the first take.
Is it?
Yeah, apparently that's the first take because Mark Webb went up to Andrew and said, because Emma Stone and Andrew Garfield were dating at the time. And he said, I want you to pretend like Emma has really died. Like, that's what I want you to think of, because that is what this would be like.
Yeah.
And Andrew is just, oh my gosh, he nailed that scene. It's so heartbreaking. It's probably the darkest scene in a Spider-Man movie that I can think of. Off the top of my head, unless you have a different one, but it's
that is the darkest one, and I give him credit for doing it because the execution of it, like I said, there's so much, there's a lot of weird and amazing too, and like Pete said, the Goblin design they went with is trash, but they nail that scene. And like you said, his acting, I'm glad you brought that up because he went on to be an Oscar-nominated actor. He's A-list talent, in my opinion. Andrew Garfield is in the film world, and he nails that. And what's funny is a lot of us fans knew that was going to happen. A lot of the mainstream was probably like, "Oh, it's just a different love interest."
Yeah,
I'm gonna laugh through all the trilogy with him, and then she dies, and everyone's like,
Well, to be honest with you, Nico, I was like, maybe I was thinking in that film, the way Mark Webb sets it up, that the Gwen storyline. And by the way, gotta give a shout out to Emma Stone, who is terrific in that role.
Oh, outstanding.
Yeah, but she, the way he set it up, you think to yourself, maybe they'll save her, you know, and they don't. What I would love to see in No Way Home is the end of it, somehow Peter redeeming that moment, and Gwen ends up saved.
Cool.
Instead of like maybe when Andrew goes back to his world, it's at that exact moment and he's able to save her. Yeah.
I think that would be awesome. I do think it would be cool because if they're doing the multiverse, just go for it, and let those two guys end, and maybe you do somewhere Toby with 2 where he does end happier with MJ or whatever. It's not as ambiguous. So
yeah.
Awesome.
Pete,
he's not. It's who's Dane DeHaan. Yeah, they did a weird. I did not like that Harry either.
That should have been a lot better, to be honest with you. I'm surprised that it wasn't as good because Dane DeHaan's a good actor.
He is. So I was shocked. I'm like, ooh, they made him really. Yeah, that material is really weird. What they did with all the Osborn stuff was really weird.
Yeah. All right, Nico. I want to ask you, and maybe some in the audience are like me. I am a Marvel Comics noob. I have just downloaded the Marvel Unlimited. I am a subscriber. I got a promotion at work, so I can afford the subscription now to Marvel Unlimited as well as DC Universe Infinite. So
you're in the okay, cool.
So I am fully stocked now. I have Comixology Unlimited, so I can read indie comics.
You're in.
I have DC Comics Infinite, so I can keep up with my DC favorites.
You're in.
And I have Marvel Unlimited. So, but what I find with Marvel is I always have trouble of knowing where to start because it's so dense and the continuity is way more intertwined in the Marvel universe.
Okay.
So I need you to tell me, what are some top comics recommendations that you can recommend to me?
So you're in luck, and after the show, because I had some extra time at work today that I got to like think about this in like a not weird way. I've been thinking about the show all day. I'm very excited. I wore Spidey socks the whole day at work. So,
Nice.
I've been very excited for this. So I found some extra time and I made a list that is almost ridiculously too long, but I'm going to send it to you later anyway. So, and I learned this from my dad. All my comic takes I get from my dad because that's how he taught me. So I feel the need. So some people like to give people like recommendation of runs. My dad always told me, give people some really good stories and then they'll want on their own time, let me check out this whole run or let me go back to the start. I will say, I just have to say this because it's true. You can't go wrong with starting right with the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko stuff. Some people, and you're a comic reader, so I wouldn't have this concern with you, but some people have a hard time going back that far because it feels dated. Even I at times try to go back to like Lee's Fantastic Four stuff, and it's a little hard for me, or like the early Bronze Age stuff in like the DC universe. I have a hard time just because it's written in a way that's a lot of exposition, a lot of them saying what they're doing, very word heavy. But Spidey's actually one that I think holds like it holds up. It's the most classic stuff ever. So I would say start there. Now, because you're a comic reader, I feel like I could give you some of my favorite ones too, because you know enough about Spidey from the films and stuff to where it's not like you have to learn who the character is. You have a great idea. A good one I think to start off right away that's only 6 parts is Spider-Man Blue by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. That one is very emotional, and it deals with it's him dealing with the loss of Gwen Stacy, which I think it's brilliant, and I actually think because that's going to spoil the story. In addition to that, I would say read The Night That Gwen Stacy Died, which is Amazing Spider-Man 121 to 122. The night Gwen Stacy died is one of the most impactful moments of comics ever. It's really the first time. Now, I wasn't alive at this point, but watching comic Spidey deal with that loss and just knowing how it changed the trajectory of the character forever is great. My favorite Spidey story ever is Kraven's Last Hunt. I don't know if you've ever read that. That one's heavy, though. Read something light after it or before it. It's a really well done kind of psychological book with Spidey and Kraven the Hunter. He's in the lovely black suit as well.
Nice.
And also in the black suit, my other favorite story is called The Death of Jean DeWolf. It's in Peter Parker, The Spectacular Spider-Man 107 to 110. It's a 4-part story. It's somewhere in the hundreds. And it's basically Peter has the cops in New York still are very skeptical of him, but there's one cop, Jean DeWolf, who was his friend, and she gets killed, and it turns into this really cool 4-part almost detective story for Pete. And for all the Daredevil fans out there, he's in the story as well. And it's actually a really early encounter for the two of them. And they both don't know who each other is yet, which is very cool. So that's great. And then I guess one more really good one. If people want to cry, it's amazing. I'm forgetting the number, but it's somewhere in the mid 200s of amazing. I think it's 240 something. It's the kid who collects Spider-Man. Spider-Man visits a child who is his biggest fan in the world, and it's just him and this kid in his kid's room. And I don't want to spoil anything because there's several emotional reveals in it that really are like, man, Spidey's the greatest hero ever. And then there's, of course, some great runs with, Roger Stern and stuff, like the amazing stuff. I'm a big Todd McFarlane guy as an artist. So the first appearance of Venom, Spider-Man 298 to 301 is great. You can't go wrong with that. But I'll send you way more. And there's a lot of our pals in the community are big on, Spider-Man comics as well, like Javi, Mr. Peter Vera, Mr. Paul Herman, who I haven't met. I know he's like a big MCU comic guy. So I'll send you what I have, but I'm sure they'll have other ideas as well. But those would be mine. Have you read any? What have you read? I'm curious.
In Marvel?
Just in Spider-Man in general, or have you never?
I have never. I don't think that I've ever read a Spider-Man. I've read random Spider-Man comics.
Sure.
I don't think that I've read any actual storylines in Spider-Man comics ever.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, because
kind of cool though, because you get to explore some of these for the first time, which is great.
I get to dive in. Spider-Man the Animated Series, which will be my recommendation for the show.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, but they adapted a lot of the classic storylines, so I'm familiar with them. I'm familiar with the way Spider-Man's character is supposed to be. I've been told that Spider-Man the Animated Series, Spidey is like the comics come to like in animation. Right. So that's why I feel confident, being able to say if something's within character or not within character. But I haven't actually read a lot of Marvel, to be honest with you. I've read Iron Man Extremis, which I thought was phenomenal. Oh my gosh.
That's really good. Good story.
I recently read is it Danny Coates or Jason Aaron? It's Thor, where he is Galactus's herald.
That's Donny Cates's.
Donny Cates
run. It's good. Yeah, his Thor's cool. His Thor's like really metal. It's like kind of rock star, like kind of badass. I kind of like. Yeah, it's good.
I love it. It's like a totally different direction from the MCU. Pete's got some recommendations here. Spider-Man Identity Crisis.
That's a good one.
The Clone Saga is a mess, but it's amazing.
I'm glad he said. I'm glad he said this because I agree. Mm-hmm. A lot of Spider-Man fans don't like it, and it is really messy and ridiculous and kind of mind-blowing, but they really swing for the fences with a twist in the story, like the twist in the story, and it's pretty respectable. I know people didn't like the twist, but when my dad explained it to me before I read it when I was way younger, I was like, this is huge. Like, this is a big deal. So I would say, but the only thing about the Clone Saga is it's really long. It's really long. So
yeah.
If you're looking for shorter things, a few of those I said are all like 4 to 6 part, and the Night Gwen Stage is only 2. One quick one that I forgot because I mentioned it earlier is I did really like the Ultimate Spider-Man comic run, and then eventually he dies, and that's where we're introduced to Mr. Miles Morales. But I really liked the Ultimate run. I actually think this week, because I was talking to JJ Hodges about it today, I think this week was like the 21-year anniversary of when it came out. I think it came out September 6th or 7th in 2000 is when Ultimate Spider-Man came out. It brings him back to when he's really young, like 15. And there's a lot of relatability in that. And they remix the villains a little bit. So like Green Goblin is like a monster. He's like a Hulk-like version of himself. Kind of like we saw in Into the Spider-Verse. He's just like that. And Venom's a little bit larger and a little bit more of a monster figure. But the issue when he dies is very emotional, and I'm glad they did it. Pete, you're right. I don't necessarily vibe with Sins Past, but he is right. They do something in there that they're actually undoing this right now in Nick Spencer's run. That was the big reveal at the end of what he's doing. He's undoing what happens in Sins Past. I meant to text you, Pete, because I haven't read it yet, but I saw it. Yeah. So those would be some of mine. I could keep going, but I'm not going to sake of not ever being able to end the show, because I'll keep going.
Yeah, well, no, those are all great recommendations. What do you think? By the way, this is kind of a sidebar, but hey, sidebars are what I do.
Sidebars are what we do. I love it.
So speaking of Ultimate Spider-Man, written by Brian Michael Bendis, of course, do you think that Brian Michael Bendis has had a big impact on DC yet, or do you think that's still...
You know, I remember when he came over, it was a huge deal. I'm not. What's funny is I haven't read a lot of what he's done. I'm not reading Justice League. I know people are like so mixed on his Superman stuff.
His Justice League, for the record, is getting more acclaim than his Superman stuff.
Okay, for sure. Good.
Yeah.
You know what? It's funny what I'll compare it to just from an outside observation, because literally what I know him the best for is Ultimate Spider-Man. And like that's like the main thing I've read and dived into from him. He's like the athlete that was really good that gets traded or signed to a new team, and then they have like a rough first couple years.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, it's kind of like, to make a Cubs analogy, it's kind of like when Jason Hayward had a great year with the St. Louis Cardinals, and then we signed him for the massive $190 million contract, and he has not been that good in the past 5 years. So I would say that's a good take, Pete. I've not read Daredevil at all, but I need to. Yeah, I would say he's still trying from the hype that was there when he came over. That has not been matched. I think there's several other writers who are doing a way better job, including Tom Taylor. I know people are hit or miss for Tom King, but I do like a lot of his Maxi series. I think are all really darn good.
I am a huge Tom King stan, so
yeah.
You're in agreement here with that.
Yeah.
Joshua Williamson seems to be the one at DC that's really making waves. He's taking over the Batman book, which is DC's crown jewel. I'm actually quite surprised that they, considering what Pete said. You know, Pete mentioned that Daredevil, Brian Michael Bendis's Daredevil, is better than Frank Miller's. I'm actually quite shocked, and maybe it's because of the mixed reviews of his Superman that they haven't given Brian Michael Bendis Batman, because that seems like that would be more his wheelhouse, more up his alley, where he's had more success. I read a couple of issues of Young Justice, and it was okay. I really like. I think Naomi's a great character. I think that's a great addition. The reason that this fascinates me is because I was listening to something the other day, and it was a podcast conversation about the New Gods, and they were talking about Jack Kirby's time at DC. And I didn't know this, but Jack Kirby was at DC for a very short amount of time.
Oh yeah,
he was there for like 2 years, and yet the characters that he introduced like reverberate through DC's lore now. I mean, they're like kind of some of the signatures of DC lore, and to me, like Bendis coming over was sort of that caliber of myth maker coming over to DC, and I don't think that he's had quite the impact that Kirby did, but obviously that took years to sort of happen as well. Yes, Pete Yuxis. Yeah, I didn't even know that was Darkseid's name until recently. But I want to end this podcast with a conversation around what would it take for MCU Spidey to be redeemed in Nico's eyes, slash a conversation, a short conversation about the No Way Home trailer, our impressions of it, what we think about it, and what we're kind of anticipating about that film.
So great question. And we kind of touched on it earlier. I just want to see him get to be himself. I want to see Tom Holland, who I think is fine. I think he's a very good actor, probably one of the better young actors out there right now. I just want to see him have a few, not just one, a few more intimate Spider-Man stories in his films that are more self-contained and not as relying on the big crossovers and continuity. I'm very excited for his college years, and I still think in No Way Home, he's going to end up being the big hero at the end, which I think is cool. Like maybe he even inspires the other two guys who are Andrew's going through the Gwen stuff and Peter's older. So I think that'd be cool for them. So I think he can and probably will be redeemed. I just want the movies. I want his material to be better. Like in so many of these stories I just named, like I want Tom to get one of these. I want to be able to say, there was a scene like, in the Raimi films, or like the crane scene, or the scene with Aunt May in the house in the Web films. Like I want more of that for Tom, and I want him and Tomei to interact more. I mean,
I don't
Tomei's an
like
incredible actress, and I don't like the material for her, especially in Far From Home.
Can I be honest with you? Yeah. I don't like the way that Tom Holland Spidey calls Aunt May. I think that's
it's weird.
It's very, very weird, and I'm so glad to hear. Like, it seems like in the trailer he's starting to call her Aunt May, which is good. Like, she kind of seems a bit like I want to see like. May Parker is an interesting character, right? Because this is a woman who has taken in her husband's nephew. She's actually not blood related to Peter.
Correct.
This is like her nephew-in-law, and she takes him in and raises him as her own. And I think that there's something beautiful about that. And I would just like to see a little bit of May kind of. She seems very casual with Peter, like. I don't think that's necessarily fair to an extent, because look, it's it is what it is, but
sure.
Yeah, I think that I actually like the Marissa Tomei casting as May. I don't mind that she's younger. I think that that's a cool different sort of take. But yeah, I would just like to see kind of more of a things. I don't call any of my aunts or uncles Aunt Ann or Aunt Jason. That's fine, Garrett. Yeah, it's funny is I call any person that I meet as an adult, I will call them by their first name.
Sure.
But anyone that I knew as a kid, I'd probably call him auntie or uncle,
sure.
Just because that's, or I do have an uncle that, that's actually my mom's cousin. That's really, that's like, I met him as an adult, but he's so warm and lovely that I call him uncle, so,
that. Oh, of course.
Yeah. So I have a lot of affection, but yeah, I want to see, I agree with you, Nikko. I want to see a more traditional Spidey. That's what I want to see in the college trilogy. I hope that's what we see. I hope we see him struggle a bit. I hope that we see that sort of thing. I want to see Ned become who is Ned? Hobgoblin, right? I want to see Ned become Hobgoblin. When are we going to see that?
Which, speaking of, that's a great story arc too, is the Hobgoblin stuff. But yeah, it would be funny if that kid had the whole villain twist too. That would be interesting for sure. That would be interesting for sure.
Also, how funny are the clips of that are floating around of like people speculating about future Spider-Man movies, and Tom Holland actually like knows what's coming up, and he has the worst poker face ever.
It's like ever. Yeah. He's sweating in that interview with Jake Hamilton. He is sweating.
Yeah.
And they know it too. Like the Jacob Baton who plays Ned is like kind of selling it. He's like, oh, that would be cool. And Zendaya's kind of like, That would. He's just like,
yeah, he's just like he's so bad at keeping secrets,
so
but it's very endearing. There's a lost episode of this show that I am going to put out at some point, and I apologies to Ryan Haas. When he recorded the show, right afterwards, I just had a series of horrible misfortunes
sorry.
with getting it done. But I recorded an episode of this show with Ryan Haas about Back to the Future. And I told him that I feel like I don't want them to ever remake Back to the Future, but I feel like if they did remake Back to the Future, Tom Holland would be a great Marty McFly.
Yeah, he would. He would.
Yeah. So yeah. But anyways, well, Nikko, I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking about Spider-Man. I enjoyed this conversation with you. I hope to have you back sometime to talk about some other stuff. Of course, when we have our, parties, we'll have you back, but doing a one-on-one show with you sometime. Maybe we'll do a show about Nightwing at some point.
Oh, that would be fun. That would be fun. That would be really fun.
That'd be great. And I don't buy comics anymore. I wait for them to hit DC Universe Infinite. So maybe once some of the Tom Taylor ones hit, we can talk, because I'm anticipating reading that series. But yes, Garrett wants to see you cut your hair into a mullet.
Garrett, no, you don't want to see that. You don't want to see it. It'll look so bad.
Thank you, Zeddy. We will do a show with you on Batman Beyond. I'm looking forward to that. And thank you all for tuning in. This was an awesome show, and we'll see you later.
You're the man, Josh. Flip.
Oh, wait. Before we go, sorry.
Oh, yeah, plugs.
Plugs.
I was like, it's one of those where we go plugless. It's okay. You could follow me at Nikko Caruso. That's at NIKKOCARUSO. It's right here on the screen on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd. You can follow my show at the Vigilante 1939 that I do with the handsome gentleman in the comics known as Zeddy, and my father as well. We do a sub show. If you liked all the Spider-Man stuff you heard, we do a Spider-Man Italian-based sub show called the Italian Spider-Man Coalition with Mr. Peter Vera. And then I do film, television, and comic reviews over at www.letsgopodcast.com. Currently doing Nightwing and The Flash comic-wise. Movies, I'm not doing another movie till Venom, Let There Be Carnage. And for TV, I'm covering Titans right now, which has been a lot of fun. So come find me there. I try to put out hot takes every now and then, but usually it's all love. I love talking about anything. Hit me up in the DMs, in the comments. And I say the words elite and slaps a lot. So if you don't know what that means, I'll explain. And yes, they have caught on with all my pals here. And
it's a very, very young millennial, because I think you would be a young millennial, right? You wouldn't be Gen Z.
I think I'm either a young millennial or the oldest possible version of a Gen Z.
Nice.
I'm somewhere in that buffer.
Well, if you want young millennial if you want the most elite young millennial / old Gen Z takes, follow Nikko Caruso. Listen to the Vigilante 1939. It's a great show. Excellent show.
Thank you.
The co-hosts are great. We need to have your dad on sometime.
I know. He's next. Next.
You know what I want to do? See if your dad's down for this. My dad is so not into any of this stuff.
That would be hilarious.
But I want to do a show where you and your dad are on and me and my dad are on, and we talk about a movie that we all like.
Okay.
So
I'm in. Dude, that would be sick.
We'll have to figure out what that is, and we could do it for Father's Day next year. So
actually, does he like The Matrix, your dad?
No.
Because my dad's never seen The Matrix either.
Ooh, maybe we could have them
do a joint. Yeah.
Maybe I could watch The Matrix with my dad and tell him I want you on my podcast, and he's gonna go.
Or have him we'll do The Godfather or something.
Yes,
something
like
really,
a classic
really classic.
film.
Yeah.
Classic dude, film that they've both seen. My dad went to art school in the 70s.
Oh, that's
so cool. My dad actually went to go see all the gritty 70s movies you could think of, because they they would do that. So I'm sure that there's a movie we could find that it may have to be me and you that have to watch the film.
Sure. Yeah, it might be. And no, I would be down for that. I would be so down for that, brother.
So, all right, man. Well, have a good one. Take care. We'll see. We'll see you next time, and join us next time for the show.